Just before I start off, just a quick show of hands. How many of you were here for the last session? All right, the reason I ask, because there are a couple of things that Sonal actually mentioned, which pretty much I think you're going to hear over the next 3 days. One of the things is from zero to hero. You don't know which game is going to hit high, and you need to be prepared. Now, Sonal was talking more from that being ready from an advertising perspective. But what I want to talk to you guys is how do you be ready if you are in any of these categories? If you're a developer, how many of you guys are technical background? All right. And any of you from gaming publishing? Anybody? Great. And do any of you qualify yourself as, say, a startup or a game studio, a new game studio? Great. So if you guys are, now that you are in this industry and you're developing certain games, there is always a possibility and there is always a case where you do not know if your game is going to go really big and are you well prepared. So over the course of the next 15 to 20 minutes, this is just going to be some 4 key points that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to share that with everybody. And if there are any questions, you can interrupt me in the middle or we can take it towards the end. So what we are trying to do today is, first I'm going to take you through a case study from 6 Waves. 6 Waves is based out of Hong Kong and is one of the largest publishers here. We're also going to talk about you as a new startup, as a game developer, or even a publishing industry or a publishing company. What do you need to be aware to actually tap into, or if you're already into it, maximize your performance on gaming on the cloud? And then finally, just summarize it all with one key slide. So one of the key questions that a lot of end gamers and even our clients ask us, do I even need to care whether I'm on the cloud, if I'm not on the cloud? Your end gamer will never care if he is. We were just talking about, the gaming industry has on the cloud has been for about 10 years. Now, 2015, they said it's going to be around 111 billion. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's gone way beyond that. So the question right now is, are we prepared to actually deal with a game that as an end user logs on and he suddenly realizes that, oh, there is a lag, there is not a performance, there is a performance issue, or he's unable to play it in real time. And that's when he will go out and figure out where was this particular game hosted, or where is the platform that this game is using. Now imagine gaming is not just about creating that game. It's not just about making revenue off the game. A game has a whole new framework around it. It's about creating that real life scenario. It's about creating something which is 3D, which, almost a movie-like experience. And if you're looking at something like that, you're also looking at a foundation of a software. A game is like a software. You are asking millions of users to sit or log into a software, and at the same instant, all of them must be having the same experience. They must go through, or they must finish off the game feeling that, yeah, I want to come back because this is a great game. So if you are looking at something like Battlefield 4 out here, now Battlefield 4 has, when Multiplayer launched Battlefield 4, they catered for a certain number of users, but instantly realized that on the same day they need to cater for additional 25,000. And again, over the course, over 100,000 players are at any time playing this game. So keeping that kind of user base happy, as a game publisher, you need to be aware of where your game is being delivered to the end user. And of course, that's the software bit of it. In addition to that, there is an advertising bit, which we went through the last session. So of course, a lot of Fortune 2005 companies are spending great amount of money to try and leverage that bit of space. So if your game goes and hits, say, a certain mark, you will be asked by these companies to give and deliver advertisements. And third is big data. Now, big data is everywhere. Big data is something that people are, again, paying a large amount of money. They're figuring out how to monetize, and gaming is a great environment. If it's a car racing game, they want to know your users what kind of cars they're driving, what kind of add-ons are they using, what kind of soft drinks are they using, and then create a kind of a persona. All of this needs to be able to be supported by your game, needs to be developed, and needs to have that kind of infrastructure, and that's where cloud really comes in. So to bring it all together, and like I mentioned, I was going to talk about 6waves. Now, 6waves started in 2008. They started mostly as a Facebook game publisher, social casual games. And over the past 7 years, they have really grown. They went through 2 series of funding. They launched a couple of really big games. The most recent in Hong Kong, it's called, roughly translated, it's Age of Three Kingdoms. It's a top-grossing one. They've acquired companies on the way. And if we look at how they started, and that's why I asked all of you right at the beginning, what kind of a background. So if we look at their journey, and I was talking to Chris Lee, who's the CTO of 6waves at MGF last month, and these were the 5 key points that he really shared with us. The first of them, of course, being startups. If you're a startup, you will understand the kind of pain or the kind of issues that maybe somebody like 6waves had to go through. They started with just 3 folks, 3 people on the team, and at the time of launching, the only concern was to have the best product, have a product which end users would like to use, would like to play. So keeping that in mind, they wanted to focus only on products, and that's why after a couple of months of experimenting, they decided to go the cloud infrastructure way with SoftLib. As I mentioned, with 3 players, and with just 3 developers, and if you're looking to start, within a year, 6waves was launching, at any particular time, they were signing up 2 to 3 games per week, which meant that they were actually spinning or creating servers, dozens of servers every month. And if you look at it from a large scenario, over a period of 7 months, that was 100 servers managed by 3 people. And to manage that kind of scaling, to make sure that your games never go down, your infrastructure is able to support those 100 servers, and still, as a startup, not invest in people, not invest in additional resources. By managing 100 servers with 3 folks, they needed that scaling capacity or capability. And that's where a really integrated control panel, having access to APIs that help you bring in more functionality, and that's what 6waves has been doing for the past 7 years. Of course, as a company grows, and as a game studio, when you start growing, or if a publisher really signs you on, the next step anybody wants to look at for a game that it goes viral. It hits, say, the 10 billion or the 10 million mark. And at that stage, are you capable, or is your game have the facility to be able to handle a global reach? So you start looking at things like CDN, Content Delivery Network. You start looking at getting closer to your end gamers. If your game, you launch your game in Singapore, but tomorrow you know that your game has suddenly gone viral overnight in the US, how do you architect your game, or how do you create your game such that you are leveraging a global network? And at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you don't want to spend unnecessarily for testing this, or if your US your US players are only going to be on for a month, why should you go out and buy and do a complete foundation setup in the US? And at the same time, how do you get it all back? So creating or getting access to a large global network is extremely essential, and that's when and SoftLib's private network, which I'll touch upon a bit later, that comes into play, because having access to 23 different data centers and moving data around with no charge on the private network, that's what helps 6waves control their costs. This is an interesting aspect, and Chris really likes to share this with new game studios. How do you decide whether you want to go virtual, or how do you decide that dedicated is the way for you? Now, when 6waves started, they really discovered that it actually depends upon the architecture of the game. So if you had a horizontal layer which needs to be scaled like a web layer, then you go for virtual because it makes it more affordable. But at the same time, if any of your games needs database or there's an IO intensive requirements, you go in for bare metal. Bare metal means that that entire box in itself, nobody shares the resources with you. So there is no performance lag, and that's where you can actually divide your cloud requirements on virtual versus dedicated versus having a hybrid model, which 6waves did. And you can go title by title, so you don't have to invest in resources. And that's how 6waves, again, is looking at controlling cost and controlling resources required to manage all this. And then finally, we have the over-the-top requirements of what are the additional things you need to look at and what 6waves looked at. A 24/7 support. As a small gaming studio or even as a large publisher, you don't want to have to work with somebody who is a specialist in, say, cloud field, but you don't want to spend money on that support. Support should be provided inclusive. The 24/7 support, non-additional charges. Why should you have to pay for something that you've already paid? You've paid for servers, for storage, for networking. You should not have to pay for additional support, or not even additional. You shouldn't have to pay for support, period. So that was extremely critical for 6waves, and that's what brought everything, the whole thing together. And so over the past 7 years, the team has grown aggressively. As you've seen, they're launching and publishing games every week. There are about 300 games currently and 5 global data centers, and they pretty much operate the whole thing like it's the same environment. So if we look at what 6waves has been doing, just to bring it down to a simple slide and explain, as a game developer, as a game studio, what do you need to look at when you are when you're publishing your games, when you're even architecting the games? Your there are about 4 or 5 key requirements. You need to have a production environment where you're developing. You need to have a testing environment. Then I spoke about CDN, or content delivery. And of course, the whole management of the entire content in terms of videos, in terms of rendering. So those kind of capabilities that you need to be able to deliver, you're looking at all of this. You're looking at a whole new infrastructure which needs to support it. You need to have web servers. You need to have database servers. You need to have firewalls. Security is so important these days. So you not only need to have firewalls in the software level, but you also need to consider whether a hardware level encryption-based security is what your game needs. Then of course you need to have load balancers. Where do you channel your games? Which network do you channel it through? Which data center do you channel it through? So keeping all of this in mind, it's not really practical to kind of invest in each of this when every 12 months there's a new hardware launching. So instead of that, what you do is go out on on-demand requirement. You go out on automated, something that can be automated, that you don't need to have a 24/7 eye on. And then you need to tie it all in through making sure that your performance never lags. Your performance is not just when you have that peak, when you have 10 million users playing your game. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be which you can rely on, and keeping both of them in constant harmony. And of course, you have as a game studio developer, as a game studio publisher, you need to be looking at networking. Your end gamers will not stay on that game and will go out and find another game, and you might not make the journey from a 0 to hero until and unless there is no performance lag. And of course, having the capacity to scale, having the capacity to control your environment. Today you have 10 servers with different configurations. Tomorrow you need to spin to 100 servers, or you need to scale back to, say, 5 servers because you are doing some kind of a test environment. Keeping that kind of a control, having the visibility where your servers are so that you can access the best users. If your user is, if your end game user is in Amsterdam, it does not make sense to host something in the cloud where you're not able to control it. You should be able to host exactly in Amsterdam and be able to access them. And so that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. So just to bring it all in and talk a bit about what Software does and why Software is, why are we here? Um, Software and gaming actually go way back. We form at any particular time, there are about 130 million gamers playing on software infrastructure at any point of time through all our various clients. So that's about, the company itself has about 180,000 servers being run in virtual, being run in dedicated or bare metal. We are supporting a global infrastructure. And if I had to talk about software with just 4 key points. We spoke about high performance. Whether you're launching a new game or you are pushing forward the performance or improving the performance of an existing game, you need to have an on-demand deployment of bare metal as well as virtual. Second, scalability. I have touched upon that. You should be able to scale up when you want, pay for what you have ordered, and then scale back without any contracts or time period. Network performance. What really differentiates software for gamers is our triple architecture. Now, what I mean by triple architecture, there are 3 separate lines for your network. One is your public line, which is unmetered for inbound traffic, which is 2000 Gbps. Then is your private network. This private network allows you as a game, as the owner of the game or the creator of the game, to reach out to your 10 servers in US, 10 servers in Amsterdam, 1 in Australia, whatever, and still create or architect your game without being charged because it's our own private network, so no traffic charges there. And finally, you have the third network, which is actually the IPMI, or an Intelligent Platform Management Interface, which allows you to control your servers. You want to switch on something, switch off something, load an operating system. So the whole point of having a triple network, that your public bandwidth doesn't get consumed by your internal work, and at the same time, your internal work is never stopped by how many players are on your public bandwidth. So we keep it pretty separate, which means as somebody who's developing, you can still continue to work on, you can still continue to display your games and let users be playing while you're controlling the backend separately. And the fourth thing and the final thing is flexibility. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are using 3 bare metals and you want to now move it into virtual, instant imaging called flex imaging, and you move it into virtual. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is work really closely with gaming companies, try and understand what are their requirements, and then bring it to new users and to new developers. These are a couple of names. We mentioned Six Waves, Garena. We've also got Electronic Arts. We've got Multiplay. We've got Kulu Games. So all of these guys are actually creating the games and taking it out to their end users on software infrastructure. We've also been working with a lot of startups. iFree Studio, Playday, they're all Hong Kong based. We're working with them pretty closely. They are launching the games on software, and they're also using the infrastructure to kind of develop and figure out what's the best architecture for their next game. The last slide, I promise. Summarizing it all. I mentioned those 3 or 4 key takeaways. Always remember, as a developer, as somebody who's in production, somebody who's in testing, there are 4 things that you need to look at. You need to be able to control your environment, ramp it up, ramp it down, see where it is, have the full transparency. Basically, end to end, it should be you and not somebody else controlling where your instance is actually located. You need to be able to deploy it fast and take it back fast, basically managing it again. And of course, you need to look at the scalability aspect and making sure that all of your end users are having the same experience. And that is what cloud really brings to you. Cloud helps you meet all of this, as well as helps you keep developing and getting you access to the latest hardware in the market, gives you access to the latest security features, and makes sure that your games are monetized in the right manner. So, yeah, that's about it from my side. Thank you so much, guys, for being such a great audience. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Yes, thank you very much, Namrata. Round of applause, please. Yeah, we got time for one question, or maybe two, if anyone else has one out there. I know I've got one I would like to ask. I'll get it kicked off then. I mean, I play a lot of games, a lot of online games as well, and the thing with cloud is, when it works well, you don't know it's there. It should be invisible, as you pointed out. But very often, you know, I've played my fair share of games, like even the biggest companies with lots of resources, and some of them still struggle, and sometimes quite badly. I mean, can you ever be properly, fully prepared for that kind of, you know, surges in demand? I mean, can you guarantee that, or is that just an inevitable part of playing online?
It's a very good question. Actually, I think at today, the stage that we are, there's so many options available that it is definitely possible to be able to cater yourself or cater the game for the eventuality that it's going to surge so much, right? So I spoke about a couple of models that we said. There is, of course, you're playing virtual, right? You're playing bare metal, which is cloud. But a lot of our large gaming companies, especially when they're developing new games, for example, if Battlefield 4, right, like I mentioned, you cater for, say, 10 million players, but it's going to hit 100 million, and you were sleeping at that time. How do you cater to that? So a lot of our big companies actually go for a hybrid model, which is on-premise and off-premise. So that means they have a certain base of infrastructure internally. But at the same time, to cater with that surge, they work on cloud model. So there are various technologies like autoscale. So you set a record saying that if at any particular time usage goes above 70%, I want these things to to get auto-ordered and don't wait for me to come up. So we keep those kind of things in mind. So another thing is there's always a security angle that your game gets attacked by, by DDoS or some kind of a thing, and you are sleeping, but you have done auto-scaling, and you're like, it shouldn't just go ahead and spin up servers while you're sleeping. So there is also a security angle and a firewall angle. So you need a 24/7 to cater to that. So yes, of course, it's possible to about 99% keep yourself safe. The 1%, well, if you go from 10 million to about 500 million, then, well, you're a lucky person.
So Battlefield 5 will be fine, is what you're saying. Good. I think that's all the time we have, I'm afraid. But thank you again to Namrata.